All right, so this is going to be just a quick overview of the muscle and nervous tissue. Mostly muscle tissue is what we're going to focus on, but don't ignore the nervous tissue part, and we'll kind of work through that as we get there. So there are three types of muscle tissue, right? Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. You can see pictures on the right here, right? So you can see they have different shapes, which we'll talk about. They have a different, or they at least have some variation in terms of the number of their nuclei. And there's also stripes or striations on some of them and not on others. Those are all things that we're going to talk about. You can also see in the middle that they are located at different parts in the body. So again, to break down, just like we've talked about the other tissues, we're going to worry about structure, function, and location. We'll start with skeletal muscle. Okay, you can see it starts with the location. So it's attached to the skeleton. So skeletal muscles are attached to the skeleton. No trick there. These can be voluntarily controlled. That's in reference to their function. So gross body movements, that's referring to like the large movements that we see that are created by the skeletal muscles pulling on bones and creating those movements. That's something we'll talk about in future units. But for right now, knowing that those larger movements, the movements that we see in ourselves or even other people, when we see them moving, those are going to generally be considered the voluntarily controlled movements that happen from the skeletal muscles. So the middle 2 points there, they're kind of referring to the function. And then the last 2 points is referring to the structure. So they have these cells, we call them muscle fibers. They're long cylinder shapes with really obvious striations. We'll see a picture of these in just a second. The striations, that means stripes. Okay, so there are real obvious stripes on these cells. And they also are multinucleated, meaning there are multiple nuclei in these cells. So when we look at a picture, right, you can see you have the long cylinders, you have obvious striations or stripes, and you can see the multiple nuclei. And so that's the structure of the skeletal muscle. And then we talked about the function is voluntary, movements, the larger movements of the body, and also the location is going to be that they are attached to the skeleton. The next one is cardiac muscle. All right. Again, the name kind of gives it away. Cardiac, the location is only found in the heart. The structural part, right, there's a single nucleus. All right. They still have striations, but instead of long cylinders, they're short and branched. So while they have striations like skeletal, they only have one nucleus, whereas the skeletal had multiple nuclei. And you also, instead of long cylinders like the skeletal, these are short and branched. And again, we'll see a picture of that in just a second. The branched cells are going to fit together at these areas called intercalated discs. And those are really important because they allow the cells to kind of communicate and to coordinate their contractions. That's the key. It's really important for your heart to work efficiently that you have those coordinated contractions. You can't just have all the muscles kind of contracting whenever they want. It would be chaos, and that would not make for an efficient pumping process for your heart. These are involuntarily controlled, which again, if you think about your heartbeat, that's not something you are controlling by your thought process. You don't have to think about it to make it happen or, anything like that. It happens. It's a process your body kind of takes care of without you having to think about it. So here's a picture of the cardiac muscle. You can see short and branched. You can still see the striations, the stripes. It's real easy to see in the picture here, or the illustration at the top right. The picture on the bottom left is, obviously not quite as clear, but that's more obviously realistic than the drawing of the top. But if you notice, you see single nuclei. Intercalated discs are these dark lines that are the connections between the cells. You can still see the striations, but they're shorter and branched. They're not the long cylinders that we had before. The third type is going to be smooth muscle. Right? Smooth muscle lacks striations, so now that's why they're smooth. Right? So that's a structural piece. Single nucleus, they're spindle-shaped, meaning they get narrower at the ends and they're thicker in the middle. Right? So that, again, is going to be structural stuff. Location, they're going to line the walls of hollow organs like your stomach, intestines, blood vessels, things like that. Okay? Again, involuntarily controlled. That is also going to deal with the function. Right? So we talked about structure, function, and location already here. The last point also talks about the function, right? These hollow organs, things don't just like fall through your body, right? There's a series of contractions and relaxation that help move things through your body, whether it's through the digestive system or through your blood vessels or things like that. Like your heart doesn't just like pump out blood and then it falls to your feet. That would not be good, right? You control the blood flow more than that. You also have, with food, your food doesn't like go from your mouth and just fall down into your stomach. It's muscles, the smooth muscles in that digestive tract that work the food to your stomach or work from your stomach through your intestines and all of those things. Okay. So that talks about smooth muscle. Here's the picture of smooth muscle. Notice, again, single nuclei. You can see that they are like longer and kind of get pointy at the ends, but thicker in the middle. That makes for smooth. No striations here. The last part is the nervous tissue. All right. For the nervous tissue, again, not as much detail that you need to know here. You need to know that the cells are neurons. Neurons can be really long, right? And we'll talk more about this when we get to the nervous system unit. But for right now, knowing that neurons are part of it, they have supporting cells, neuroglia, that are going to help support the cell, and they'll be in the surrounding area. We'll see that in just a second. The function is going to be irritability, which basically just means detect a stimulus, and conductivity, which means send a signal. So they need to be able to detect a stimulus and send a signal. That's what nervous system cells, nervous tissue, neurons, that's what they do. Detect signals and then send signals. All right. So that is the key. Here's a picture of a neuron right here in the middle, and then the neuroglial cells are around. Those are the supporting cells. And we'll talk more about like the specific functions of each of those things when we get to the nervous system unit later in the year. All right. So I hope that helped a little bit with just kind of overviewing some of these muscle tissues and then a little bit about the nervous tissue at the end. If you have any questions, please let me know.